And then for our hosting cost, in our comments, it mentions that our hosting cost is charged based on gigabyte consumption, 0.1 per gigabyte for the first 400,000, and then 0.03. We can see that our total gigs is already over 400,000. So hosting cost, 400,000 times 0.1 plus the total gigs minus 400,000 times 0.03. So this should be our hosting cost. So let's just link this to over here as well. So for compensation, it mentions that we plan to hire a new sales manager to start in October, in addition to 2 more account executives starting in November and December. This will not have any impact on sales, and we can simplify how we calculate compensation by just dividing salary by 12 for monthly cost. So 1 new sales manager in October, 2 new AEs November and December. So based on these details, we're going to add another manager of sales, but instead, no employee ID. The start date is going to be October 31st, 2025. And then 2 account executives, one in November 30th, 2025, the other in December 31st, 2025. And the way I'm going to assess compensation here is by, again, setting up another schedule. And I highly recommend getting used to setting up these schedules for more detailed analysis. So we have this detail, and if the end date is empty, then if the current date is greater or equal to the start date, then I want to divide the salary by 12, otherwise 0. And then if and H3 is greater or equal to the start date, and H3, which is our analysis date, is less than or equal to the end date, then I want to divide the salary by 12, otherwise 0. So this is just assessing that if they don't have an end date, they're still active. So we just have to make sure that the date that we're analyzing is greater or equal to when they started. But if they have an end date, we have to make sure that this analysis date is between the start date and the end date, which is what this formula is doing. So we can drag this across, and we now have the compensation for all our employees. So we can then sum the total, and then for our compensation, we are going to link it to September's total compensation. Now for operational cost, so we plan to keep our existing license and may possibly get an additional vendor Datadog, which may cost an additional 4,000 per month. We're just going to simplify this. We're just going to add 4,000 and just continue this across. Professional fees. We plan to continue our consulting engagements except for GTM consultants. So I'm just going to quickly double check for professional fees. And I can see that GTM consultants stopped in May 31st. So we can actually just continue our August expenses. Travel cost. We have an event semi-annually, so we generally incur more travel and food near June and December, which is why in May we have a higher travel cost. So what we can do here is determine the average monthly cost that are outside of major events. So I'm going to sum these values over here divided by the number of months. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So on average, we incur about $250 per month if we even it out throughout the year. But we know that in November, we also incur a higher amount. So let's just reference to 4039. Meals, the same thing. For these events, we incur higher meals. So in June, we incur much higher than what we normally see. So we're going to, again, average. And then let's just lock this. And then in December, we're going to incur about 1,000. Office expense, let's just average it. And then rent expense is just going to be 1.1K. And we now have our forecast. So let's create a total column as well. So we're going to call this total, and we're just going to sum everything. And now we have to analyze this result against budget. So here I'm just going to reference the total that we have here. And then I'm going to bring in the budget as well. So that's just some products, the budget details, where the financial items equals the financial items that we're analyzing. And then we can then set up the variance, where total minus budget. So we can see that in total, our EBITDA is actually not that far off. And honestly, we don't have details of the budget. They just gave us the details as is. So we have to make some high level assumptions. So for product revenue, we can mention that revenue is less due to lower new customer acquisitions as a result of the loss of the sales manager, expected to pick back up in FY26. Hosting cost is favorable because of lower gigabyte consumption due to lower revenue. And then compensation, we don't have much details, but we can just write something high level. So lower compensation expense due to lower hiring compared to budget. And then license expense is higher due to a new vendor Datadog that was not budgeted for. And with this, we have completed the case. I apologize if I went a little bit too fast on some areas. The content was just getting too long, but if you have any specific questions about the case, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to clarify any points. And again, this file is on my website. I highly do recommend for you to try it to see how all these different data that would exist within a company would work together to put together a financial forecast and budget for a company. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I'll see you next time. Bye.